Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab.
Great to be here.
We often think about dedicated study time when learning a language, right? Sitting down with books and apps.
Right, the traditional approach.
But what if you could weave it into something else? Something you might already be doing?
Like getting some exercise.
Exactly. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something pretty interesting. Combining a healthy habit, your morning jog, with English listening practice.
And it can be surprisingly powerful, especially for non-native American English speakers.
Yeah, it's not just about fitness, is it? It's about unlocking some unique ways to boost listening skills, build vocabulary, maybe even get a better feel for the culture.
Definitely. We're going to explore how you can, easily make this part of your routine.
It really is remarkable, this pairing. Body and mind working together.
It creates a much more dynamic learning environment than just, say, sitting at a desk.
So let's make this real. Think about someone, let's call her Maria. Moved to Chicago. Her formal English, pretty good. But understanding everyday chat, casual American English, that was a real hurdle for her.
Yeah, that's a common challenge, the gap between textbook English and real-life conversation.
Totally. And the usual methods weren't quite cutting it. Then a colleague suggested listening to English audio, like podcasts or something, during her morning jogs.
Ah, interesting. So did it help?
Apparently, it really started to shift things for her.
That makes sense. Maria's story, it really highlights a key point here. By doing it consistently, jogging and listening, she built this routine. Learning wasn't a separate chore anymore.
Right, it became immersive.
And the fact she started understanding workplace chat better, even picking up slang, that shows it works in the real world.
It really does emphasize that this isn't just exercise. It's about consciously building a habit that feeds your language goals and boosts your well-being.
Okay, so let's dive into the specifics. How exactly does a morning jog turn into an English lesson?
Well, the big one is listening comprehension, right?
Wow.
When you're jogging, you're just listening. No visuals, like in a video.
Right, so you have to focus more intensely on the audio itself, the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation of American English, whether it's a podcast, audiobook, music.
Yeah, imagine you're listening to, say, a podcast about American entrepreneurs. You're not just hearing words passively.
No, you're actively engaging with how people actually speak, the idioms they use naturally. It's pure audio immersion.
And the jogging itself, the physical part, that actually helps too.
It does. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, and that can genuinely help with things like memory and concentration.
So your brain might actually be more receptive.
Potentially, yeah. When you're listening during your jog, you might find new words or phrases just stick better because of that physical engagement.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And beyond the brain boost, there's the whole emotional side too, isn't there? Learning a language can be stressful.
It absolutely can feel overwhelming sometimes, but jogging is a known stress reliever. Exactly. Those endorphins can make the learning feel less intimidating. It can actually build your confidence. Imagine jogging while listening to a really engaging audiobook. That combo can make learning feel, well, positive. Enjoyable, even.
Definitely. And thinking bigger picture, consistency is always the name of the game in language learning.
Crucial. So if you make jogging part of your regular morning, you automatically carve out dedicated time for English practice.
A built-in study slot.
Pretty much. And over time, that consistent exposure builds a strong habit. You see gradual but noticeable progress. Maybe start simple, then move to more complex stuff.
And it's not just about decoding the words and grammar, right? You mentioned culture earlier.
Yes, that's a really vital point. A lot of audio content gives you insights into American culture, humor, values, you name it.
How so?
Well, listening to discussions about holidays or sports or just everyday life, you gain context, understanding why the language is used the way it is.
Like listening to a sports podcast might teach you terms everyone uses in conversation.
Precisely. It's cultural understanding that goes way beyond just memorizing vocabulary lists.
Okay, this sounds really promising. So if someone listening is thinking, all right, I want to try this, what are the first steps?
First off, define your goals. What do you want to achieve? Understand the news better? Follow work chatter more easily? Just enjoy American music more?
Why is that so important?
Because having a clear goal helps you pick the right audio content. Tailoring it makes it way more effective and honestly more engaging for you.
Good point. So what kinds of audio resources would you suggest? depending on your level.
Sure. For beginners, look for stuff with shorter segments, clear pronunciation, simpler words, maybe ESL-specific podcasts.
Okay. And intermediate?
Intermediate learners, they could really benefit from things like storytelling podcasts, stuff with more natural speech patterns, maybe something like All Ears English or The Moth.
Right, real stories.
And advanced. Advanced learners can tackle more complex topics, richer vocabulary, think Radiolab or maybe the New Yorker Radio Hour. Loads of options there.
And music, audiobooks.
Absolutely. Music by American artists, Taylor Swift, Bob Dylan, whoever you like is great. And simpler audiobooks, maybe something like Charlotte's Web to start can be really good too.
Nice to have that range. Okay, so you've picked your audio. What's next? Planning the actual jog.
Yeah, plan your route. Find somewhere safe and ideally pleasant. A park, a quiet street, a trail. Makes it much easier to stick with it if you enjoy where you're running.
And how long should you aim for?
Maybe start with 20 to 30 minutes. You can gradually increase it as you get fitter and more comfortable.
And gear must make a difference too, I mean.
Oh, for sure. Comfortable running shoes are non-negotiable. Breathable clothes help. And decent earbuds are pretty important.
Wireless, probably.
Wireless is definitely convenient. Maybe noise canceling if you run somewhere busy helps you focus on the audio. And, an armband or something to hold your phone.
Makes sense. Now, what about someone who's totally new to jogging? How do they ease into this?
Yeah, definitely don't just go out and run for 30 minutes straight on day one.
Right.
Start slow. Really slow. Maybe a mix of walking and jogging. Like jog for a couple of minutes, walk for one, repeat.
Like intervals.
Exactly. And early on, maybe focus more on just enjoying the audio, not stressing about understanding every single word. You'll naturally start picking up more over time.
And keeping track of progress. Is that helpful?
It can be really motivating. Maybe keep a simple log, jot down new words or phrases you hear, or any cool cultural things you pick up.
And then look back occasionally.
Yeah, reviewing those notes shows you how far you've come. It's a nice little boost.
Okay, we know building new habits is tough. What about staying consistent? Any strategies for sticking with a morning jog and listening routine?
The absolute biggest thing is to make it enjoyable. Choose audio you genuinely find interesting, a podcast you can't wait to hear the next episode of, an audiobook that grips you, music you love.
If you look forward to the listening part, you're more likely to do the jogging part.
Basically, yes, enjoyment is the secret sauce for long-term success. Well, maybe find a jogging buddy, someone else learning English, or even just someone who likes running. You could chat about what you listen to afterwards. Practice speaking, too.
Oh, interesting idea.
Setting a consistent time helps cement the habit. Laying out your clothes the night before removes one little barrier in the morning.
Small hacks, big difference.
And reward yourself. Acknowledge your milestones. Hit a week straight. Treat yourself somehow. Keeps the motivation up.
And it's okay to miss a day, right? Don't beat yourself up.
Absolutely. Life happens. You won't understand everything. It's a journey. Just get back to it the next day. Even short sessions count. Perfection isn't the goal.
Good reminder. Now, you mentioned combining this with other healthy habits to really max out the benefits.
Definitely. Think about fuel. Eating well supports your jogging and your brain function for learning.
Like what?
Maybe a light snack before, like a banana for energy. And after, something with protein and carbs for recovery. Hydration is key too, before, during, if it's a long run, and after. Crucial for body and mind.
And stretching.
Yes. Stretching before and after helps prevent injuries, promotes relaxation, even things like getting enough sleep that's vital for physical recovery and for memory consolidation, which is huge for language learning.
So it's really about building a whole supported routine around the jogging and listening.
Exactly. It amplifies the positive effects.
Yeah.
Think about maybe Ahmed in Seattle. He wanted to improve his English for job interviews.
Okay.
So he started jogging while listening to TED Radio Hour, those kinds of engaging talks, learned new vocabulary, new ways of expressing ideas, helped him ace his interviews.
Wow, that's a great example.
Or Sophia in Miami, loved American music but struggled with the lyrics. She jogged, listened to songs, focused on understanding, even repeated the lyrics, boosted her comprehension and her confidence.
See, those stories really show how adaptable this is. Different goals, same basic method. But it can't all be smooth sailing. What are some common roadblocks people hit, and how do you get past them?
Okay, common one, just feeling too tired in the morning.
Yeah, the snooze button is tempting.
Totally. Strategy. Start short, like really short jogs. And maybe try adjusting your sleep schedule gradually. Listening to something upbeat can help too.
What if the audio is just too hard to understand?
That's another big one. Key is finding the right level challenging, but not totally overwhelming. If it's too tough, find something slower, clearer. Don't be afraid to hit rewind and replay sections. That really helps.
Makes sense. What about just losing motivation?
Happens to everyone. Mix up your audio, keep it fresh, find an accountability buddy, maybe someone online, or that jogging partner we mentioned. Having someone else involved helps.
And bad weather. That can derail things.
True. Always good to have a backup plan. Treadmill at home or the gym, or even just do some indoor exercises while listening. The key is maintaining that listening habit.
Those are really practical fixes. It sounds like with a bit of planning and persistence, this morning jog thing can actually be a serious asset for learning English.
It really can. When you step back and think about it, integrating that morning jog with focused English listening, it's a powerful combination. Remember Maria in Chicago?
Yeah. Understanding casual English better through podcasts on her runs.
Her story really shows the real-world impact. And consider all those benefits we talked about. Better listening skills from focusing just on audio. The brain boost from exercise helping you remember stuff.
The stress reduction, confidence building.
Right, building a consistent learning schedule almost automatically, plus getting that cultural exposure through different types of audio.
And setting that clear goal first helps you choose the right audio, whether it's news, work talk, or just enjoying music.
Exactly. And explore those resources we mentioned. Different things work for different levels. Remember the practical stuff too. Safe route, comfy gear like good shoes, and wireless earbuds.
Starting slow, mixing walking and jogging if you need to.
And tracking progress, noting down those new words. For the long haul, keep it fun. Choose audio you love. Maybe find that jogging buddy. Set a consistent schedule. Reward your milestones.
And don't aim for perfection. Even short sessions add up.
Absolutely. And think about pairing it with those other healthy habits, good food before and after, staying hydrated, stretching, maybe even mindfulness. It all connects.
The stories of Ahmed nailing his interviews and Sophia getting confident with song lyrics show it works for different people in different ways.
For sure. And yeah, there will be challenges, morning fatigue, hard audio, motivation dips, bad weather. But remember the fixes. Start slow, adjust sleep, choose the right audio level, replay things, mix it up, find support, have indoor options.
So the takeaway really is that a simple morning jog, something you might do anyway, can become this amazing personal English classroom.
Leading to better fluency, more confidence, and hey, a healthier lifestyle too. It's a win-win.
It really sounds like it. Well, hopefully this gives you some ideas to try out.
We hope so.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, please do like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive where we take some really cool stuff and break it down so you don't have to.
That's right. Today we're diving into a source that I think will really resonate with a lot of you out there. It's all about making the most of your morning routine to level up your English skills.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, think about it. How many of us are already trying to squeeze language learning into our crazy busy schedules?
It's tough, right? But this guide we've got called Everyday English Conversations for Your Morning Routine.pdf, it kind of flips the script and shows us that those everyday moments, those first few hours of the day, are actually packed with opportunities to practice.
Yeah, I love that idea of hidden potential, just waiting to be unlocked. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this deep dive.
Totally. We're going to break down those everyday morning scenarios and pull out all the gems, the phrases, the vocabulary, the practical tips that you can start using right away.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning, right? That moment when the alarm goes off, or maybe you hit the snooze button a few times, like me.
Guilty as charged. Haha. But even those kind of bleary-eyed moments are full of language potential.
Totally. I mean, think about those first words you might say, or think, good morning, time to wake up. Or, I'm still sleepy.
Or if you had a rough night, I didn't sleep well last night. Which honestly, let's be real, who hasn't been there?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's that classic, I need 5 more minutes, as you're clinging to those last precious moments of sleep.
And of course, the frantic, where's my phone, as you search for that lifeline to the outside world.
Yep. I think we've all been there. What's so cool, though, is that these super simple phrases, they're like universal connectors, No matter where you are in the world, chances are people are saying or thinking the same things.
It's so true. And the source actually points this out. It emphasizes how these seemingly basic phrases are the foundation of everyday communication.
And they even give us a little snippet of a dialogue between 2 people, Emma and Jake, who are waking up late. It goes like this. Good morning, Emma says. And Jake's like, morning, I didn't hear the alarm. And then there's that slight panic. It's 7:15 already. You're going to be late. It's just so relatable,
It is. And it's also a reminder that real conversations, they're not always grammatically perfect or super complex.
Exactly. It's more about just getting your message across in a natural and understandable way.
And speaking of learning naturally, let's talk about the vocabulary boost we get from this section of the source.
Yeah, there's some really useful words here, like alarm clock, of course, and snooze, which some of us might be a little too familiar with.
Haha, no judgment here. Then we have groggy, which perfectly describes that fuzzy-headed feeling after you first wake up.
And stretch, which is something I definitely need to do more of in the morning. The source even gives us a great example sentence. I woke up feeling groggy, so I hit the snooze button twice.
I love how they show us the words in action like that. It makes them so much easier to remember.
Totally. And it actually taps into how our brains learn best, right? By associating words with real experiences and contexts.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to make connections. So when we see a word like groggy and it's linked to that feeling, we all know it just sticks better.
Makes total sense. So we've tackled those first few moments after waking up. Now let's move on to another essential part of the morning routine, the bathroom.
Ah, yes, the bathroom. Another goldmine for language practice. Even something as simple as asking if the bathroom is free can be a chance to use your English.
Totally. The source gives us this example conversation between Sarah and Tom. Is the bathroom free? Sarah asks, and Tom's like, I'm almost done, just brushing my teeth. Then Sarah's like, okay, but please hurry up. I have to shower before work. And Tom says, give me 5 minutes.
Such a classic morning scenario, right? That little dance around shared resources.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the great thing is you can practice this dialogue whether you actually live with someone or not. You can imagine yourself in that situation and just say the lines out loud.
Exactly. And the bathroom vocabulary list is so practical. You've got all the essentials: toothpaste, toothbrush, floss, mouthwash.
Then you've got the hair care essentials: shampoo, conditioner, soap, towel.
And of course, the things we see when we look at the mirror, sink, razor, hair dryer. Just mentally naming these items in English as you use them is a super easy way to reinforce those words.
Okay, so the source also gives us some really actionable tips for this stage of the morning routine, like narrating your actions in English.
Yeah, I love this one. So as you're brushing your teeth, you can say, I'm brushing my teeth. Or as you're washing your face, I'm washing my face. It might feel a little silly at first, but it's seriously effective.
Because you're creating that direct link between the physical action and the English phrase, which, as we said earlier, is how our brains learn best.
Exactly. And another great tip is watching short English videos while you're getting ready, multitasking at its finest.
Oh, for sure. And if you're feeling really ambitious, you can even practice your pronunciation in front of the mirror. Really focus on how you're forming the sounds with your mouth.
It's all about making the most of those little pockets of time throughout your morning.
Okay, so we've covered waking up and the bathroom routine. Now what's next on the morning agenda?
Well, for most people, it's time to fuel up for the day ahead. Let's talk about breakfast conversations.
Yeah, because breakfast isn't just about getting energy. It's also a prime opportunity for some really useful English practice.
You know, it's funny how many common phrases and questions we use around breakfast without even thinking about it. Like, what do you want for breakfast? Do you want eggs or toast?
Or the simple, I'm making coffee. Can you pass the milk? We're out of cereal. These are all phrases that come up in so many households every single morning.
And the source gives us a really great example of a typical breakfast conversation at home between a mom and her son, Alex. It starts with, good morning, what would you like for breakfast? And Alex says, can I have scrambled eggs and toast? And the mom's like, sure, do you want tea or coffee? And Alex replies, just water, please. I'm not really hungry today.
It's such a simple and relatable exchange, and yet it's packed with useful language.
And it highlights how, even in those everyday moments with family, we can be practicing our English without it feeling forced or awkward.
Totally. Now, the source also takes us beyond the home and into a cafe setting, which introduces a whole new set of phrases that are super valuable to know.
For sure. Like, I'd like a cup of coffee, please. Can I have a bagel with cream cheese? Do you have any vegan options? And of course, that classic, can I get that to go?
And they give us a sample dialogue of a customer ordering at a cafe. The customer says, hi, can I get a cappuccino and a blueberry muffin, please? The barista asks, would you like that for here or to go? The customer says, to go, please. And then the barista's like, okay, that'll be $5.75. Can I get your name for the order?
It's such a typical cafe interaction, and it shows us how to navigate that situation smoothly in English.
And we get another awesome vocabulary list this time, focusing on breakfast foods and drinks and cafe-related terms.
Yes, so we have breakfast staples like toast, eggs, bacon, oatmeal, cereal, pancakes.
For drinks, we have coffee, tea, juice, smoothie, milk.
And then for the cafe itself, we have words like order, menu, to go, dine in, receipt, change. Knowing these words just makes those cafe experiences so much less stressful.
Absolutely. And the source gives us a really cool practice tip for this section. It suggests repeating simple dialogues like the ones we just went through aloud while you're actually preparing or eating breakfast.
Yeah, it's like you're immersing yourself in the scenario and anchoring those phrases in a relevant context.
And if you're feeling extra dedicated, they also suggest recording yourself and listening back. This can help you identify any areas where your pronunciation or intonation could be improved.
Great idea. It's like having your own personal language coach.
Okay, so moving on to the next section of the guide, which focuses on talking with family or roommates in the morning.
This is all about utilizing those natural interactions you have with the people you live with to practice your English in a comfortable and low-pressure environment.
Exactly. I mean, think about those common morning greetings and questions you might exchange, like, did you sleep well? What's your plan for today? I've got a busy day ahead.
Or even just a simple, let's have a good day today. These little phrases can go a long way in both practicing your English and strengthening those relationships.
The source gives us a sample conversation between two roommates. Roommate 1 says, morning, how'd you sleep? And roommate 2 is like, pretty well, I was so tired last night. Roommate 1 says, same here, I've got a meeting at 9, you. And roommate 2 replies, class starts at 8, I need to rush.
It's just a snippet of everyday life,
Yeah.
but it shows how easy it is to incorporate English into those casual conversations.
And I love the example they give of a parent giving their child some morning motivation. The parent says, you've got this, just give it your best today. And the child responds, thanks, I'll try my hardest. It's such a sweet exchange, and it shows how even brief, encouraging phrases can be a great way to practice.
Absolutely. And it highlights how language is so much more than just words. It's about connecting with others and expressing ourselves.
Totally. Now, this section also introduces some useful vocabulary for talking about your daily plans.
Yes. So we have chores, which refers to those routine household tasks. Errands, which are those short trips you need to make schedule, which is your overall plan for the day. And appointment, which is a specific time you set for something.
Knowing these words will definitely come in handy when you're chatting with your family or roommates about your day.
And the source gives us some cool tips for making the most of these morning conversations with the people you live with.
Yeah, like starting a morning question habit. So committing to asking one new question each day in English.
It's a great way to challenge yourself and actively use the language.
And another tip is to use sticky notes with English phrases around your home, like on the fridge, the mirror, wherever you'll see them often.
Those visual reminders can be surprisingly effective in keeping your brain engaged with the language.
So we're moving right along. Now we're getting to that part of the morning where we're getting ready for work or school, section 4 in the source.
Yeah, it's all about those practicalities of preparing to leave the house. And naturally, a lot of the language we use in this stage revolves around time.
Definitely. Like, what time is it? We're running late. I've got 10 minutes to get ready. Do you have everything you need?
Those familiar phrases that we probably all say or hear at some point during the morning rush.
And the source gives us this super relatable dialogue between two people, Alex and Lily, who are getting ready to leave. Alex asks, did you pack your bag? And Lily's like, yes, I've got my laptop and charger. Then Alex reminds her, don't forget your lunch. And Lily's like, thanks, what time do we leave? And Alex says, in 10 minutes.
It's just a little snapshot of a typical morning, but it shows us how these everyday conversations can be great opportunities to practice.
And of course, we get another helpful vocabulary list. This time, it's all about those essential items we need for work or school.
Yeah, so we have backpack keys, wallet, ID card. Those are the absolute must-haves. Then there are things you might need for work or study, like notebook, pen charger, headphones.
And then, depending on the weather or your dress code, you might need a uniform, jacket, umbrella, or certain shoes. Just mentally listing these items in English as you're gathering them is a great way to reinforce the vocabulary.
And the source also points out some common questions you might ask or hear in the morning related to school or work, like, what subject do you have first? Do you have any meetings today?
Or in today's world, a very relevant question, are you working from home or going in? These are all great examples of how the language we use can reflect current trends and situations.
And for this section, the source suggests a really fun practice tip, using a mirror to act out conversations.
Yeah, they give this example, I'm wearing my blue shirt today, have a math test, I need to leave by 7:30. It's like you're putting yourself in that situation and really practicing those phrases as if you were talking to someone.
It's a great way to boost your confidence and make the language feel more real.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about another prime opportunity for English practice, the commute.
Yes. Section 5 of the source is all about commuting and small talk. That time we spend traveling to work or school can actually be a really valuable learning experience.
Totally. Even if you're not having full-blown conversations, you can still be listening to English thinking in English, or even just observing how people interact around you.
And if you do want to strike up a conversation, the source gives us some helpful conversation starters, like, how's the traffic? It's a bit crowded today. The bus is late. I hope we're not late.
Those are all very relatable observations that can lead to further discussion.
And they provide an example of a simple exchange on the bus. Anna says, hi. Is this seat taken? Ben replies, no, go ahead. Anna says, thanks. Do you take this bus every day? And Ben's like, yeah, it's usually on time, but not today. It's just a brief interaction, but it shows how you can use those small talk opportunities to practice.
And the source suggests some great topics for small talk, like the weather, which is always a safe bet.
News can be a good one too, though. It's probably best to stick to more neutral topics, as the source wisely points out.
Yeah, you don't want to accidentally spark a debate on your morning commute.
And weekend plans are always a nice, lighthearted topic to chat about.
Totally. Now, this section also gives us a really useful list of travel vocabulary.
Yes, words like bus stop, train station, subway, platform schedule. Knowing these terms will definitely make navigating public transportation in an English-speaking environment a lot easier.
And then there are those practical words we often encounter when traveling, like rush hour, traffic jam, fare, ticket, pass.
The source gives us some great tips for making the most of our commute time, like listening to English podcasts or news, which is a fantastic way to turn that travel time into learning time.
And even just making an effort to greet people with a smile and a simple hello or good morning can be a good way to practice and boost your confidence.
Absolutely. It's all about those little interactions that add up over time.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our deep dive, and the final section of the source focuses on something really interesting: morning motivation and self-talk in English.
Yes. This is all about using the power of our internal dialogue to set ourselves up for a successful day and reinforce our language learning.
I love this idea because our self-talk can have such a huge impact on our mood and our overall outlook.
Totally. And the source suggests incorporating some positive self-talk phrases into our morning routine. Things like, I'm ready to start the day. I can handle anything that comes my way. Today is full of opportunities. I believe in myself.
Saying these phrases out loud, even if it feels a little strange at first, can really help to shift your mindset in a positive direction.
And they suggest creating a little morning affirmation routine. Stand in front of the mirror, give yourself a smile, and say 3 affirmations in English, repeating each one twice.
It's a simple but powerful way to start your day with intention and to get your brain thinking in English.
They provide some great examples of affirmations like, I am learning English every day. I am confident, focused, and positive. I attract good things with my attitude. And that important reminder, mistakes help me grow.
It's all about cultivating that positive growth mindset, which is essential for language learning and for life in general.
Absolutely. And they even give an example of how you can use self-talk in English to prepare for a specific situation, like a big meeting. They suggest saying something like, okay, stay calm. I've prepared well. Just speak clearly and smile. I've got this.
It's like giving yourself a little pep talk in English to boost your confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source points out some useful vocabulary related to emotions and goals. So we have words like confident, nervous, excited, focused to describe how you might be feeling.
And then we have words like task, challenge, goal, achievement, which relate to what you're working towards.
It's all about expanding your vocabulary so you can express yourself more fully in English.
Now, the source also gives us some really practical tips for practicing self-talk in English, like keeping a journal and writing just 3 lines in English every morning.
That's a great way to solidify new vocabulary and practice structuring sentences.
And recording your voice, as we mentioned before, is always a valuable exercise for improving pronunciation.
Another great tip is to start your day with a gratitude practice by saying, I am thankful for, and then listing a few things you're grateful for in English.
It's a wonderful way to cultivate a positive mindset while also getting in some language practice.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that our morning routines are full of untapped potential for English language learning.
We've covered so much ground, from waking up to getting ready to commuting, and even the power of our own internal dialogue.
And the key takeaway is that by making small but consistent efforts to incorporate English into these everyday moments, we can accelerate our progress and make learning feel more natural and integrated into our lives.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's about finding those little pockets of time and using them wisely.
And as the source encourages, the most important step is simply to start speaking English tomorrow morning, even if it's just 1 or 2 new phrases.
So here's a little challenge for you as you go about your day. Think about one new English phrase that you can consciously incorporate into your morning routine tomorrow.
It could be something as simple as, "Good morning, world," or "I'm going to make the most of this day."
Whatever it is, embrace that opportunity to use the language and see where it takes you.
You might be surprised at the connections and insights that emerge from those small but consistent efforts.
So that's it for this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. And remember, the power to level up your English is right there in your morning routine.
So go out there and make the most of it.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone. Ever get that feeling? Like you're mentally prepping yourself, for one of those tough conversations at work.
Oh, yeah.
The ones I mean. Like maybe a deadline got missed and it's causing a bit of a domino effect.
Yeah.
Or having to break it to someone that their pet project is getting shelved.
Right.
Or even just dealing with a disagreement you can sense is brewing between team members. I think we've all been there at some point, haven't we? It's just part of working life.
It is. Yeah, it's that realization that something needs to be addressed carefully.
Yeah.
And how you approach those conversations, it really can have a ripple effect, not just in that moment, but on your relationships at work, long term.
For sure. So for today's deep dive, we're going to be focusing on a really practical skill, and that's diplomatic language.
Yeah.
Specifically, in these tricky professional scenarios, we've been digging into some really interesting material that's actually, it's aimed at helping even advanced English speakers really master these conversations. But honestly, the insights are gold for anyone who wants to communicate more effectively at work and build stronger relationships.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that this isn't just about being polite just for the sake of it.
Right.
There's a real strategic advantage to being able to communicate diplomatically. It can actually help you get your point across and achieve what you want to achieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking about preserving relationships, right?
Yeah.
Trust is such a fragile thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, a bank account.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Every time you say something harsh, it's like you're making withdrawal. And then it takes a lot of positive interactions to build that back up again.
Makes sense.
It's also about enhancing your professional image, right? When you can handle tricky situations with grace and tact, people just naturally listen to you more.
For sure.
They respect your opinions.
It builds credibility.
It's about building influence. And crucially, it's about nipping misunderstandings in the bud before they snowball into something bigger.
Yeah.
Using clear diplomatic language just reduces those chances of confusion and those emotional flare-ups that none of us want.
Definitely. So let's unpack this a bit. When we say diplomatic language, what are we actually talking about? What does that look like?
So fundamentally, it's about minimizing that potential for conflict, keeping that sense of mutual respect and making sure your message gets across without causing offense or unnecessary friction.
Right.
It's like a balancing act, really.
It is. It's like walking a tightrope almost.
Yes.
You've got different priorities to consider.
Right.
And there are a few key elements that help us walk that tightrope. One is softening those direct statements.
Okay.
So instead of just coming out and saying something very bluntly,
Yeah.
you find ways to phrase things a bit more gently. Another is using indirect language when, being direct could feel a bit too confrontational.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, it's this constant dance between being honest, because you still need to communicate the necessary information, but doing it in a way that's polite and considers the other person's feelings.
Right. And a huge part of it, I think, is consciously avoiding blame.
Oh, yeah.
And those accusatory tones that just immediately make someone feel defensive. And that shuts down the whole conversation before it even really starts.
Exactly. And if we think back to those benefits that we talked about,
right,
you can really see how these all fit together.
Yeah.
Softening your language, not pointing fingers. This directly helps protect those relationships because people don't feel attacked.
Right.
They're more open to talking.
Yeah.
Being honest but polite, this boosts your professional image. It shows that you're a thoughtful, mature communicator.
Yeah.
And being clear and tactful, this naturally reduces misunderstandings because you're choosing your words carefully to avoid ambiguity or triggering someone emotionally.
Makes sense. Okay, let's bring this to life with some real-world situations.
Okay.
Because I think that's where it really clicks.
Yeah.
For people listening,
Yeah, for sure.
We've all had to deal with performance issues, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely.
At some point.
Yep.
So let's say you've got a team member who consistently misses deadlines.
Okay.
What's a non-diplomatic way that conversation might go?
Well, unfortunately, a common but ineffective way would be something like, "You're always late with your reports. This is unacceptable."
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can almost feel the hackles rising just hearing that. What's so problematic about that kind of statement?
Well, first off, always is a very strong word.
Yeah.
And it's rarely actually true.
Right.
It instantly puts the other person on the defensive.
Uh-huh.
It feels like a personal attack rather than focusing on the behavior. And unacceptable, that's such a loaded word, you know?
Yeah.
It's so judgmental. It shuts down any chance of a productive conversation about how to actually improve things.
Yeah.
It just focuses on the negative without offering any solutions or empathy.
Okay, so thinking about how you could handle this differently,
Right.
what would a more diplomatic way to address that same issue look like?
The material we looked at actually suggests something like, "I've noticed some delays with the recent reports. Let's discuss how we can improve timelines going forward."
Yeah, that feels so much better already.
Yeah.
What are those key differences that make this approach so much more effective?
Well, there are a few things I've noticed is much softer, right? It's just an observation.
Yeah.
It's not an accusation.
Right.
It's focused on the facts
Uh-huh.
rather than attacking their character or work ethic.
Yeah.
And that second part, let's discuss how we can improve timelines going forward. That's crucial
Okay.
because it shifts the focus.
Uh-huh.
It turns it into a problem to be solved together.
Right.
It invites them to be part of the solution.
Yeah, and the resources we've been looking at, they highlight some really helpful phrases you can use
Right.
in these kinds of situations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So instead of jumping straight to, something very direct, you could say something like, "I wanted to check in on."
Yeah, it's a good way to open a conversation about something a bit sensitive.
Yeah, or "I've observed that."
Right. Again, focusing on what you've seen rather than being judgmental.
Okay.
And then to really get that collaboration going, how can we work together to resolve this?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears to another tough situation. Delivering bad news.
Yeah.
Let's say there's a project a team's been really pouring their hearts into, and it suddenly gets canceled.
Oh, that's tough.
How might that news be delivered in a very non-diplomatic way?
It could be something really blunt, like, "The project's canceled. There's nothing we can do."
Oof, talk about a punch in the gut.
Right?
What makes that approach so problematic for you?
Well, it's just so direct. And it completely lacks any empathy for the team, for all their hard work,
Right.
their enthusiasm, and their likely disappointment. There's nothing we can do, is so dismissive.
Right.
It sounds final.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave any room for discussion or even acknowledging how this will affect the team or
Yeah.
their efforts.
Okay, so if you were the one having to deliver this news, how could you do it more diplomatically?
Okay, so a more thoughtful, more diplomatic approach would be, after careful consideration, we've decided to discontinue the project. We understand this may be disappointing, and we're here to discuss next steps.
Okay, that's so much better.
Yeah.
What are those key elements that make that phrasing so much more sensitive to how the team's feeling?
Okay, so after careful consideration, that shows that the decision wasn't made lightly.
Right.
It wasn't impulsive.
Mhm.
We've decided. It's a clear statement of fact.
Right.
But it avoids blaming any one person or team. And then, crucially, we understand this may be disappointing. That acknowledges their feelings.
Yeah.
It shows empathy. It validates their emotions.
Okay.
And we're here to discuss next steps. That offers support. It provides a path forward.
Right, so it's not just leaving them hanging with that bad news.
Exactly.
And again, those resources we've been looking at, they point out some really valuable phrases you can use in these situations.
Oh, definitely.
So things like, "After reviewing the situation."
Right, it suggests a deliberate process.
Yeah.
We regret to inform you that.
Oh.
That acknowledges the news is negative,
Yeah.
but it keeps it professional.
Right.
And this one's so important. We appreciate your hard work and we'll support you through this transition.
Yeah.
Because you want to recognize their efforts
Yeah.
and offer your support during what will likely be a difficult time for them.
Okay, let's tackle another common workplace challenge.
Yeah.
Conflicts between colleagues. Let's say you've got two team members who are constantly butting heads over who's responsible for what.
Right.
What's a really non-diplomatic way a manager might step into that situation?
Oh, it could be something like, "You two need to stop fighting and figure it out."
Ooh, that sounds dismissive.
Yeah.
Like it's just brushing the whole thing under the rug.
It is. It is. It doesn't get to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't offer any guidance or support, and it can leave those individuals feeling unheard and like their manager doesn't care enough to help.
So putting yourself in that manager's shoes, what would a more diplomatic and constructive way to approach that tension look like?
It could be something like, I can see there's some tension here. Let's take a step back and clarify roles to avoid any future misunderstandings.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Because it acknowledges the situation, right?
Yeah.
But without blaming anyone or taking sides.
Exactly. I can see there's some tension here. That's just an observation.
Okay.
It's not a judgment. Let's take a step back. That suggests a calm, considered approach and clarify roles to avoid future misunderstandings. That's about finding a proactive solution rather than just telling them to stop arguing.
Okay, so what are some key phrases you might use in your own conversations to navigate those kinds of team conflicts?
Well, I sense there's some disagreement is a gentle way to start.
Okay.
Then, to show you want to find a solution together, let's find a middle ground.
Right.
And to really emphasize that everyone needs to be on board, how can we move forward in a way that works for everyone?
Makes sense. Okay, last scenario, and I think this is one a lot of people listening will relate to. Saying no politely.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've all been there, haven't we? Swamped with work. And someone asks for just one more favor.
Oh, yeah.
What's that non-diplomatic, maybe even a bit abrupt way to respond?
Well, the classic one is, I can't help you, I'm too busy.
Yes, straight to the point, but maybe not so good for the relationship.
Yeah, gets the message across.
Yeah.
But it can come off as dismissive.
Right.
And unhelpful.
Yeah.
And that could damage the relationship with that colleague.
Okay, so when you're up to your eyeballs in work,
Right.
how can you decline a request diplomatically, but still keep things positive with your colleague?
A more considerate way would be, I'd love to assist, but my current workload is pretty heavy. Maybe mentioning another colleague who could help or a later timeline would work.
Oh, that's much better.
Yeah.
You're still setting a boundary, but you're offering alternatives.
Exactly. I'd love to assist. That softens the no.
Yeah.
It shows you had good intentions.
Right.
My current workload is pretty heavy. That's a clear reason without making excuses.
Yeah.
And then suggesting another colleague or a different timeline shows you're still trying to be helpful.
So what are some good phrases to keep in mind when you need to say no politely?
So something like, I appreciate you reaching out, but that acknowledges their initiative.
Right.
Then at this time, I'm unable to commit due to...
That gives a reason without being too specific or negative.
Okay.
And let me suggest an alternative.
Right.
That shows you're still trying to help.
Okay, so we've gone through some specific tricky scenarios and how to handle them diplomatically.
Yep.
Let's zoom out a bit now.
Okay.
And look at some broader key strategies for diplomatic communication that you can use in just about any professional interaction.
Sounds good.
So one of the most fundamental strategies is to use softening language.
Oh, yeah.
What does that look like in everyday workplace conversations?
Instead of making really strong statements that could sound confrontational, you can use phrases like, it seems like.
Right.
That presents an observation.
Okay.
Rather than stating something as absolute fact.
Yeah.
Or, I might be mistaken, but that shows humility.
Right.
And invites discussion. Even a simple, perhaps we could consider when you're suggesting an idea.
Yeah.
That can be much more diplomatic than a direct order. So it's about creating that space for dialogue.
Absolutely.
And not sounding like you're challenging someone.
Exactly. Another really powerful technique is to switch your language to focus on we instead of you when you're talking about problems or solutions.
How does that small change in pronoun actually affect the conversation?
It's huge. Think about how it feels to hear, you didn't follow the process.
Yeah.
That sounds like you're being blamed.
Right.
But if you say, let's realign on the process to ensure consistency across the team,
Okay.
now it's a shared understanding. It's a team effort.
Right.
So for those listening, think about how you can rephrase some of the feedback you give and use we instead of you.
That's a really good tip. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the classic sandwich technique for feedback.
Yeah. The sandwich.
Classic for a reason, right?
It is. It just makes it easier to hear constructive criticism.
Okay, for anyone who's not familiar, can you break down how the sandwich technique works?
Sure. So you structure your feedback in 3 parts.
Okay.
You start with a positive comment,
Right.
then you give the constructive feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and then you finish with something encouraging or supportive.
Well,
The idea is to cushion the criticism with positive things,
got it.
so it's easier to swallow.
Okay, can you give us an example? Like how you might use it in a real situation at work?
Sure, let's go back to that missed deadline example.
Okay.
You could say something like, I really appreciate your dedication to this project. That's the positive part.
Uh-huh.
Then, one area we could improve is sticking to the agreed upon timelines.
Okay.
That's the constructive feedback.
Right.
And then finish with, I'm confident that with a little more focus in this area, your contributions will be even more impactful.
That's good.
So you see how it softens the blow.
Yeah, it feels much more like guidance and less like a personal attack.
Exactly. And then another really important strategy for diplomatic communication is to ask open-ended questions.
Okay, what are some examples of questions that can really get that conversation flowing?
Questions that encourage people to share their thoughts and perspectives.
Mhm.
So instead of saying, do you understand this approach? You could ask, what are your thoughts on this approach?
Okay.
Or instead of, is there a problem?
Mhm.
You could say, how do you see this situation unfolding?
Got it. So you're inviting them to really engage in the conversation.
Exactly. It's about having a two-way dialogue, not just giving information.
Now, it's really important to keep in mind that what's considered diplomatic can vary quite a bit across different English-speaking cultures.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's super relevant in today's diverse workplaces.
Definitely.
So can you give us some examples of those cultural nuances in communication?
Sure. So in the US and Canada, communication tends to be pretty direct,
Okay.
but still polite.
Right.
So you might hear things like, I'd suggest.
Okay.
It's a suggestion, but it doesn't sound too forceful.
Right.
Whereas in the UK and Australia, things can be a bit more indirect, with more focus on implied meaning. So you might hear something like, perhaps we might consider,
Yeah.
which is much softer, more tentative.
And what about when you're working with colleagues from Asia, particularly in those multinational settings?
That's where cultural awareness is really key.
Okay.
In many Asian cultures, communication has a lot of context,
Uh-huh.
meaning that a lot of the message is conveyed through nonverbal cues and shared understanding.
Right.
So you have to be really good at reading between the lines,
Okay.
paying attention to body language, tone of voice.
Yeah.
Even silence can mean different things.
Mm-hmm.
It can indicate disagreement or discomfort.
Right.
So being aware of these cultural differences is essential for effective communication.
Absolutely, especially as our professional networks become increasingly global.
Exactly. So to sum it all up, mastering diplomatic language is a really valuable skill to have.
It is.
It's not just about being polite. It's a strategic way to navigate tricky situations and build strong relationships at work.
We've looked at a whole range of scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Performance issues, bad news, conflicts, saying no.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about specific phrases to use and broader strategies like softening your language and focusing on we instead of you.
Exactly. And don't forget those cultural nuances.
Right.
They're so important for making sure your message is understood.
So for those listening, think about the strategies we've discussed today
Yeah.
and how you can apply them to your own professional interactions. Maybe there's a conversation you've been putting off because it's tricky.
Right.
Think about how using these approaches could help you handle it more smoothly.
And here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Think about how consistently using diplomatic language doesn't just help you in those isolated situations. It actually helps create a more positive, more collaborative, and ultimately less stressful work environment.
Yeah, that's so important.
Think about the long-term impact on your career
Right.
and your relationships.
Makes you think,
It does, doesn't it?
yeah, food for thought.
Okay, so have you ever noticed how much of our lives actually involve negotiation?
Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. Big things, small things, it doesn't matter. Salary talks, buying a car, even just deciding where to go for dinner.
Oh, totally. That last one can be the toughest negotiation sometimes, honestly.
Yeah.
Especially with the different tastes and all.
Right. And then imagine trying to do all that in English when it's not your native language. Talk about adding another layer of complexity.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about the words themselves. It's the whole, cultural dance around them, knowing what to say, when to say it, how to say it.
It can be a minefield, really. And that's exactly why we're diving deep today into the world of English negotiation. We've got this super detailed guide here, packed with insights and strategies. So our mission, basically, is to break it all down for you, make it clear, and hopefully give you a solid foundation for navigating these tricky situations.
Absolutely. We'll be covering a lot of ground, the basics of what negotiation actually is, the key vocabulary and phrases you'll need, the different stages of the process, those little communication tricks that can make all the difference.
Oh, and don't forget the cultural side of things, how different approaches might clash or surprisingly work in your favor. And of course, we'll be looking at real-life examples, practical stuff you can actually use.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's about being able to walk into these situations, whether it's a business deal or just asking for what you want and feeling confident,
Exactly. So while we're going through all this, I want you to think back to a time when you maybe struggled with a negotiation in English. What tripped you up? Was it the language, the cultural aspect, or something else entirely? Keep that in mind, because understanding those hurdles is the first step to overcoming them.
Okay, so first things first, let's define negotiation. What are we actually talking about here?
Well, simply put, it's a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, on the surface. But the guide actually breaks it down into 4 key steps: preparation, discussion, bargaining, and agreement. Each one plays a crucial role in getting to that final handshake. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Right. And before we even get into those steps, the guide lays out some really important principles to keep in mind throughout the entire process.
Yeah, those foundations, they make all the difference.
Exactly. So first up, we have the win-win approach. Now, this doesn't mean everyone gets everything they want. That's rarely realistic, right?
Definitely not. It's more about understanding that a good negotiation isn't a zero-sum game. It's not about one person winning and the other losing.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where both parties feel they've gained something valuable, that the agreement benefits them both.
Exactly. Because ultimately, a deal built on mutual benefit, it's more likely to stick. It's more sustainable and strengthens relationships in the long run.
Which makes perfect sense in both business and personal contexts. And speaking of understanding the other side, that leads us to the next principle: active listening.
Ah, yes, this one. Way more than just, waiting for your turn to talk.
It really is an art, isn't it? Truly hearing what the other person is saying, not just the words, but also the, unspoken needs and concerns behind them.
It involves giving your full attention, comprehending the message, and then responding in a thoughtful way. And remembering the key points, of course.
Because, let's be honest, sometimes we're so focused on what we're going to say next that we miss crucial details.
All the time. But when you actively listen, you're not just absorbing information, you're building trust and understanding. And that's key to finding those win-win solutions we were talking about.
Then we have confidence. This one, I think, can be especially tricky when English isn't your first language. It's easy to feel unsure of yourself, even when you know what you want.
It's a common struggle, for sure. And it can really undermine your position in a negotiation. But the guide stresses that confidence isn't about being aggressive or pushy.
Right. It's about being clear, assertive, and expressing your needs and boundaries respectfully, but firmly.
Preparation is key here. When you've done your homework, when you know your worth and have strong arguments to back up your position, that confidence shines through naturally.
Exactly. And then finally, we have flexibility. Because, let's face it, things rarely go exactly according to plan, right?
Oh, never. In negotiation, being willing to adapt, to consider alternatives, that's crucial.
Because clinging rigidly to your initial stance, that can lead to a deadlock pretty quickly.
It can. Being flexible means being open to compromise, to finding creative solutions that might not have been on the table initially, but still meet the core needs of both parties.
So we've laid out the fundamental principles. Now let's talk language. Because as the guide points out, knowing the right words and phrases can make a huge difference in how effectively you can negotiate in English.
It's like having the right tools for the job. You wouldn't try to build a house with just a hammer, right?
Exactly. So the guide starts by introducing some general negotiation terms. These are essential to understand, like the basic building blocks of the conversation.
So first up, we have an offer. This is your initial proposal, your starting point.
Then we have a counteroffer, which is the other party's response. proposing their terms, which may or may not align with your initial offer.
Then there's compromise, which is where both sides give a little to reach an agreement that works for everyone.
And sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, you might hit a deadlock. That's when you just can't seem to find common ground, at least not at that moment.
And then there's a concept of bargaining power. This is your ability to influence the outcome of the negotiation.
Now, this isn't always about formal authority or position. It can also come from having more information, more options, or simply a better understanding of the situation.
Exactly. It's about leverage. And the guide then moves on to provide a bunch of super useful phrases categorized by the different stages of a negotiation.
It's like a cheat sheet for navigating those tricky conversations.
It really is. So let's start with starting the negotiation. How do you open that conversation effectively?
Well, the guide suggests phrases like, "I'd like to discuss the terms of,"
which is clear, direct, gets straight to the point. You can also opt for a more collaborative tone with something like, "Let's find a solution that works for both of us."
Right, and expressing confidence in reaching a positive outcome can also set the right tone. Something like, "I believe we can reach a fair agreement."
Now, once you've set the stage, it's time to put your cards on the table, so to speak. It's time for making an offer.
So how do you go about that in a way that's clear but also leaves room for negotiation?
A straightforward statement like, "We propose," can work well. Or you could phrase it as a question like, "How about?" which sounds a little less forceful, more open to discussion.
And if you want to signal that you're pretty firm on your position, you could use, "Our best offer is." But be careful with this one.
Yes, using best offer too early in the game can limit your flexibility later on.
Now, of course, you'll likely be receiving offers in return, and they might not always align with what you were hoping for. So how do you go about responding to offers constructively, especially when you need to push back?
Well, you could say something like, "That's a bit lower than we expected. Could you go higher?" Which is polite, but clearly signals your disappointment.
Or, "I appreciate your offer, but we were thinking more along the lines of, this softens the rejection a bit while still stating your desired range."
And if the offer is close, but you need to tweak some details, you could say, "That sounds reasonable, but can we discuss?" This opens the door for further negotiation on specific points.
Okay, so now we get to the heart of it, the bargaining stage. This is where the real give and take happens.
This is where those active listening skills really come into play. Understanding their offers, responding clearly, and looking for those win-win compromises.
So what are some key phrases for navigating this crucial stage?
Well, to explore flexibility, you could ask, "Is there any flexibility on the price?"
And to suggest meeting in the middle, you could say, "What if we meet halfway?" A classic compromise tactic.
And to keep the conversation flowing and explore alternatives, you might say, "Would you consider?"
And then hopefully all that back and forth leads to the moment of truth, closing the deal. What are some phrases that signal you're ready to finalize things?
Expressing satisfaction with, "I think we've reached a fair agreement," is a good way to indicate you're happy with where things landed.
Or a more action-oriented phrase like, "Let's finalize the details to get the ball rolling."
And a simple, clear confirmation like, "I'm happy with these terms," leaves no room for ambiguity.
But of course, not all negotiations are smooth sailing. Sometimes disagreements are inevitable. So how do you go about handling disagreements constructively?
Well, acknowledging their perspective is crucial, even if you don't agree. You could say something like, "I understand your point, but have you considered?"
Right. You're showing respect, but also subtly introducing another idea. You could also suggest a shift in perspective with, "Let's look at this from another angle." This can help break a stalemate.
And to reinforce the collaborative spirit, you could say, "Perhaps we can find a middle ground."
This whole section on useful phrases, it really is a goldmine. But now let's move on to the stages of a negotiation. The guide outlines 5 key stages, and we briefly touched on them earlier, but let's dive a bit deeper.
Stage 1, the foundation upon which everything else rests, is preparation. And honestly, I think this is where people often falter. They jump into a negotiation without really thinking it through.
Right. They might know what they want, but they haven't considered the other side's perspective, their needs, their motivations, and that can be a critical misstep.
Totally. Preparation means doing your research, understanding the market, the industry standards, the other party's potential position. It also means knowing your limits, your walkaway point. What's the absolute minimum or maximum you're willing to accept?
Right, because if you don't know your boundaries, you're more likely to get pushed into a deal that doesn't actually serve you.
Exactly. And this preparation, it feeds into your confidence. The more prepared you are, the more self-assured you'll feel going into the negotiation. And that confidence can be a game changer.
Okay, so after you've done all that groundwork, you move into stage 2, opening the discussion. This is your first impression, so setting the right tone is crucial.
It really is. This stage is about establishing rapport, being clear about your goals, but also being respectful of the other party. The guide gives a great example. Thank you for meeting with me. I'd like to discuss my salary based on my experience and contributions.
It's professional, direct, and sets the agenda without being confrontational. Then we get to stage 3, which is often the most dynamic part of the process, bargaining.
This is where those offers and counter-offers fly back and forth, and those persuasive language skills we talked about really come into play.
It's about understanding their offers, articulating your responses clearly, and looking for those areas of potential compromise. Remember that salary negotiation example we talked about?
The one where the employer starts with an offer of $50,000 and the candidate counters with $55,000, politely asking, would that be possible?
Exactly. It's assertive, but also open to discussion. Now, assuming all goes well, that bargaining leads to stage 4, closing the deal. What's essential here?
Well, clarity is paramount. You want to ensure both parties are on the same page, summarize the agreed upon terms, confirm the next steps, maybe even put it all in writing.
This prevents misunderstandings later on. And the example in the guide where they agree on a salary of $53,000 with specific benefits and then follow up with a confirmation email, that's a great illustration of closing the deal cleanly.
Couldn't agree more. And then finally, we have stage 5, which is often overlooked but still important, follow-up.
What does that involve beyond just basic courtesy?
It's about making sure that all commitments are met. If there's a contract, ensure both sides are adhering to the terms. If it was a verbal agreement, follow through on any promised actions. This builds trust and reinforces the positive relationship you've hopefully established.
Okay, so we've gone through the stages. Now let's shift gears and focus on some specific communication techniques that can really elevate your negotiation game. The guide calls them effective communication techniques. And first up, we have active listening, which we discussed earlier as a general principle. But how do you actually put it into practice during a negotiation?
Well, using phrases like, I see your point, or I understand where you're coming from, shows that you're actively processing their words. It validates their perspective.
And asking clarifying questions is another way to show you're engaged and want to ensure you're understanding them correctly.
Things like, could you explain that further? Or, so if I understand correctly, you're saying. It's not just about nodding along, it's about showing genuine interest and making sure you're both on the same page.
Right, and that can make a huge difference in building rapport and trust. Now, the guide also emphasizes the importance of polite but firm language. This can be a delicate balance, especially when you're navigating cultural nuances and potentially feeling a bit less confident in English.
It is. It's about being direct and clear about your needs, but also being respectful of the other party. So instead of a blunt, no, that's unacceptable, you might say, I'm afraid that doesn't quite work for us.
Or instead of, your price is too high, you could try, we were hoping for something closer to. You're still communicating your position, but in a more diplomatic way.
Exactly. And then there's the technique of using conditional sentences. These can be really helpful in finding compromises and exploring potential solutions.
Those if-then constructions.
Exactly. For example, you could say, if you could offer a longer payment period, then we would be willing to increase our initial offer. It links a concession on your side to a desired outcome from theirs.
It creates a sense of give and take, which is essential in negotiation. And finally, we have nonverbal communication. It's easy to get so focused on the words that we forget about the power of body language.
No, absolutely. Maintaining appropriate eye contact shows sincerity and engagement.
A confident posture can reinforce your assertiveness. And even simple things like nodding to show understanding can make a difference.
It's all about being aware of your nonverbal cues and how they might be interpreted, both consciously and subconsciously. Now, we can't talk about negotiation in English without addressing the elephant in the room, or rather, the globe in the room, cultural considerations.
Because the way people negotiate, it varies so much across different cultures. What's considered acceptable or effective in one context might be totally inappropriate in another.
Absolutely. And the guide provides some really helpful insights into this. It highlights that Western cultures, particularly in the US and the UK, tend to be more direct in their communication, value efficiency, and aim to reach agreements relatively quickly.
Whereas in many Asian cultures, like in Japan or China, building strong relationships and trust is paramount. The negotiation itself might be more indirect, with a greater emphasis on harmony and saving face.
And then you have cultures like in the Middle East, where bargaining is often an expected and even enjoyable part of the process. Negotiations can take longer as relationships are built and offers are carefully considered.
So the takeaway here, as the guide emphasizes, is to do your research. Learn about the cultural norms of the people you'll be negotiating with. Even a basic understanding of the communication style, their values, and their approach to decision-making can make a world of difference.
It can. It helps you build rapport, avoid misunderstandings, and ultimately negotiate more effectively. And this applies even in local contexts. Think about it. Even within your own city, you're likely interacting with people from diverse cultural backgrounds.
Right, so that cultural awareness, it's a valuable tool, not just for international business deals, but for everyday interactions as well. Now, to really bring all this to life, the guide provides some common negotiation scenarios with examples. I always find these super helpful for seeing how these principles and phrases actually play out in real situations.
It's one thing to know the theory, but seeing it in action, that's where the real learning happens. So let's start with salary negotiation. This one's always a bit nerve-wracking, isn't it?
It can be. So in this scenario, the employer kicks things off with an offer of $45,000. The candidate then counters with a polite but firm counteroffer of around $50,000, justifying it based on their experience and industry standards.
And they don't just throw out a number. They ask, is there any flexibility? Which opens the door for further discussion. The employer then comes back with a revised offer of $48,000, along with the promise of a performance review in 6 months. And in the end, they reach an agreement.
It's a great example of that back and forth process, that dance of offers and counteroffers that ultimately leads to a mutually beneficial outcome.
It is. And it shows the importance of being prepared, knowing your worth, but also being willing to compromise. Now, let's look at a different scenario. Price negotiation. This time in the context of buying a car.
Oh, this one can be a real battle of wills sometimes. So, in the guide's example, the seller starts at $15,000. The buyer, armed with research on comparable models, counters with a lower offer.
And they don't just lowball. They provide a justification for their offer, which adds credibility.
Right. And eventually, they reach a compromise closer to the middle, around $14,000. But then the buyer skillfully negotiates for an added benefit, a 1-year warranty. It shows that negotiation isn't just about price. It can also be about securing additional value.
Absolutely. And finally, we have a business contract negotiation, where the focus is on project timelines.
Deadlines, always a point of contention.
In this example, the client wants the project completed in 2 months. But the service provider, knowing the scope of work, suggests a more realistic time frame of 3 months.
And instead of just digging their heels in, they explore alternative solutions. They propose a phased delivery approach where the most critical parts of the project are delivered first.
And they ultimately agree on a 6-week time frame for that first phase, which addresses the client's urgency while also ensuring the provider can deliver quality work.
It's a great example of how flexibility and creative problem solving can lead to a win-win, even when the initial demands seem incompatible. So those were just 3 examples, but they really highlight how the different stages, the vocabulary, and the communication techniques we've discussed all come together in real-life negotiations.
And to wrap things up, the guide provides some essential tips for successful negotiation in English. These are like the golden nuggets of wisdom based on experience and research.
So let's go through them. First up, and this might seem obvious, but it's worth repeating, practice.
Practice those common phrases, those responses to offers, ways to express agreement or disagreement. The more familiar you are with the language, the more confident you'll feel in the moment.
It's like rehearsing for a play. The more you practice, the smoother your performance will be on opening night. And speaking of staying calm, that's another crucial tip. Even if the negotiation gets heated, try to maintain your composure.
Because getting emotional, it rarely helps. It can cloud your judgment and make it harder to think clearly. So take a deep breath, stay calm, and remember to be polite even when you're pushing back.
And one of the most empowering pieces of advice the guide gives is to be prepared to walk away.
Knowing your limits, knowing when to say no, that's crucial. Because if you're not willing to walk away, you're more likely to accept a deal that's not in your best interest.
And then there's the power of silence. The guide mentions using silence strategically. This might feel awkward at first, especially if you're from a culture where silence is uncomfortable.
But sometimes, after you've made an offer, a well-placed pause can be more effective than words. It gives the other party time to consider your proposal without feeling pressured.
And finally, and this is so important, confirm all agreements in writing.
Get it down on paper or in an email or a text, whatever works. This prevents misunderstandings later on and ensures everyone's on the same page.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's clear that while negotiating in English can be challenging, it's by no means impossible.
With the right tools and strategies, you can approach these situations with confidence and achieve successful outcomes. It's about understanding the principles, mastering the language, and being mindful of those all-important cultural considerations.
And always remember, negotiation is a skill that can be learned and honed with practice. The more you do it, the better you'll get. So as you go about your day, think about the negotiations, big and small, that you encounter. What could you do differently? How could you apply these principles and techniques to achieve more favorable outcomes?
And think about the cultural dynamics at play. How might your approach need to adapt based on the person you're interacting with? We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you're interested in exploring more advanced negotiation tactics, or maybe delving into specific scenarios in more detail, let us know. We're always open to suggestions for future deep dives.
Until then, happy negotiating.